The sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the broken skyline in hues of blood red and burnt orange. Silence, once peaceful, had turned ominous in a world devoured by the undead. What once buzzed with life now sat in ruins, burnt cars, shattered windows, and empty streets echoing with the distant moans of creatures that were no longer human. Amid the skeletal remains of a once thriving city, Eli Carter, a former paramedic, crept through the narrow alleyways of downtown Providence, Rhode Island. His breath was shallow. He kept his grip firm on the metal pipe he scavenged 2 days ago, knuckles white from tension. The smell of rot clung to the air like smoke, a constant reminder that death walked with the living now. It had been 3 weeks since the outbreak. No warning. No mercy. The virus spread faster than any government could contain. Hospitals fell first. Then cities. Then the military. The world didn't end in a fiery explosion, it crumbled slowly, groaning under the weight of chaos. Eli ducked into an abandoned pharmacy. Shelves were ransacked, medicine gone, but he wasn't looking for pills. He needed bandages. Not for him, but for a teenage girl he found limping outside the barricaded remains of the Civic Center. She hadn't said much. Just a name, Mara, and a single word, bitten. But not by a zombie. She swore it was a wild dog. Eli didn't believe her, not entirely, but hope was in short supply, and he clung to it recklessly. He found a dusty first aid kit under the register, half crushed but usable. As he turned to leave, he froze. A low growl. Not a zombie. Not quite. Standing in the broken doorway was a runner, a mutated form of the infected, faster and more aware than the usual shamblers. Its head twitched violently, jaw gnashing in silent spasms. It hadn't seen him yet. Eli pressed his back to the counter, heartbeat in his throat. He slid a mirror fragment from his coat and angled it slowly to get a better view. The runner was sniffing the air. Its eyes were cloudy, but its senses were sharp. Eli had one chance. Gripping the pipe, he waited for the creature to move. 1 step. 2. Then, a sudden clang from the back of the pharmacy. Bottles tumbling. The runner turned instantly, sprinting toward the noise. Eli didn't wait. He bolted, feet pounding against tile and debris, the doorway blurring as he burst out into the open. Across the street, smoke coiled from a distant rooftop. A signal. Eli knew that flare, it was part of the resistance group he'd heard over shortwave radio. The Ashbourne Collective, rumored to be operating out of the ruins of Fort Beacon. If he could get there, Mara might have a chance. Back at the safe house, Mara sat in silence. Her eyes were wide, haunted. Eli had left her with his knife, told her not to open the door for anyone unless she heard his voice. But someone was knocking. 3 slow taps. Then silence. Then 2 more. It wasn't Eli's signal. Her breathing quickened. The knife trembled in her grip. She backed into the shadows of the kitchen, the door creaking as another knock echoed, louder this time. She stepped on a broken glass shard. The knocking stopped. Mara held her breath, praying. Suddenly, from the back door, came the faintest click, the unmistakable sound of a lock turning. The lock clicked again. Mara's heart raced in her chest as she gripped the knife, its cold steel biting into her palm. She strained her ears, listening intently, but the silence that followed the click was almost worse than any noise. With trembling hands, she slowly backed away from the door. The room felt smaller, darker, the shadows growing longer. Her mind raced. Was it a trick? Could it be the infected, somehow smarter than before, learning to manipulate fear? Or could it be a survivor, like her, seeking refuge in this decaying world? She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making it impossible to breathe properly. Then, the unmistakable sound of boots crunching glass. The back door creaked open, sending a shiver through her spine. Mara held her breath, the knife's edge pressing against her leg. Her eyes darted around the dim room for anything that could serve as a weapon. There was nothing but debris. The footsteps stopped. The door clicked shut behind them. She wasn't alone anymore. "Hello?" a voice called out, low and uncertain. Mara didn't answer. "Hey, I'm not here to hurt you," the voice continued, quieter now. "I just need to talk." The voice was familiar, yet not quite. She knew it wasn't Eli. His voice was calm, reassuring, but this one was younger, frantic, edged with desperation. She couldn't risk making a sound. "Please, don't," the voice cut off abruptly, replaced by the faint sound of scratching at the door. Something shuffled in the corner, making Mara's blood run cold. It wasn't just one person. She could hear it now. The soft hiss of breath, the groan of someone struggling to breathe. Her heart pounded in her ears. No. It wasn't just a person. Her grip on the knife tightened as her gaze fell to the floor. The infected had found her, and they were waiting just beyond the door. The slow, shuffling noises were unmistakable. The infected had already breached the outer barricade. She wasn't safe anymore. The voice on the other side of the door grew louder, pleading now. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm here to help." But Mara's instincts screamed to stay quiet. Don't trust anyone. But how long could she keep hiding in silence? Outside, Eli was moving fast. Too fast. His boots slapped against the cracked pavement as he hurried toward the signal flare on the horizon. Each step was a countdown, the tension rising with each second. He didn't know if Mara was safe, but if she was still alive, he had to get to her. She was all he had left. The Ashbourne Collective was his only hope. A group of survivors, rumored to be preparing to leave the city and head toward Fort Beacon. But the road was long and treacherous, and Eli wasn't foolish enough to think it would be easy. He didn't even know if they'd take him in. A sudden rustle behind him made Eli stop dead in his tracks. His eyes flicked to the shadows in the alley where a figure lurked. Someone had followed him. Or worse. Someone had been watching him for a while. A figure stepped into the dim light. A man, unshaven, dressed in rags, with a thick scar running down his face. His eyes were wild, feverish. Eli's hand went to his pipe. "Who are you?" The man's lips curled into a grin, revealing rotting teeth. "You don't know me, but I know you. Eli Carter. You've been talking about the Ashbourne Collective, haven't you? I can help you get there. But first, you need to help me." Eli tightened his grip on the pipe, eyes narrowing. He was being offered a bargain, but it smelled like a trap. His mind raced, but he knew he couldn't afford to ignore any possible ally. "I don't trust you," Eli muttered. The man laughed. "Nobody does. But here's the thing, you're gonna need me. Because if you don't follow me, you'll be dead before you even make it to the Ashbourne signal." Eli tensed, instinct telling him that he couldn't afford to be on his own anymore. The city was crawling with infected, and there were other dangers too. Rogue groups, merciless survivors willing to kill for food, weapons, and supplies. Finally, Eli nodded. "Lead the way." As the man turned, his eyes flicked toward the horizon, where the flare still burned. The Ashbourne Collective was close, but it wasn't just a safe haven. It was a gamble. And in this world, everyone had a price. Back at the safe house, the door creaked open fully. Mara's pulse thundered in her ears. She stood frozen, knife raised, ready for whatever came through that door. A shadow entered. It was a woman, tall, with dark hair tangled and matted. She didn't look infected. But the blood on her clothes, the scratches on her skin, said otherwise. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't know who else to trust. I'm running out of time." Mara's grip on the knife loosened just a fraction. Could she trust this stranger? "Who are you?" Mara asked, her voice barely more than a breath. The woman looked at her, desperation in her eyes. "I'm not who you think I am, but we both need to survive. Help me, and I'll help you." Mara's eyes flicked nervously from the woman to the knife in her hand. The words she wanted to say felt stuck in her throat, tangled by fear. Was she making a mistake? Could this woman really be trusted, or was she another danger in a world that no longer made sense? the stranger stepped forward slowly, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I know how this looks," she said, her voice weak but clear. "But I'm not one of them. I'm not infected." Mara hesitated. She could see the deep exhaustion in the woman's face, the hollow look in her eyes, like someone who had survived too much, for too long. Yet, the blood smeared across her clothes, the dark stains spreading from the numerous scratches on her arms, were undeniable signs of a close encounter with the undead. "I'm Mia," the woman continued, lowering her hands slightly. "I was with a group, people who were trying to make it to a safe zone. Ashbourne. You might have heard of it." Mara nodded warily. The Ashbourne Collective was a name that had surfaced in whispers over the past few weeks. A rumored band of survivors who had figured out a way to escape the city's chaos and find sanctuary in a fortified compound. But like everything else in this apocalyptic world, the truth was hard to come by. "What happened?" Mara asked, still clutching the knife. "If you were with them, why aren't you there now?" Mia's gaze dropped to the floor. Her voice faltered. "My group, they were attacked. We were ambushed by a rogue band of survivors, twisted, dangerous people who know no limits. They were after supplies, but it wasn't just about survival for them. It was about control, domination. They took everything from us." Mara's heart skipped a beat. The world had always been brutal, but the idea of groups fighting for power in this new age of the apocalypse sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't just the infected she had to fear anymore. It was people, too. Mia's eyes met Mara's. "I escaped, barely. But I can't go back alone. I need help, and you need someone who knows the way to Ashbourne. I can get you there. But you need to trust me." Mara stared at her, feeling the weight of the decision press down on her. Could she trust this woman? And more importantly, could she afford to trust anyone in a world so fractured, so cruel? Before Mara could respond, the distant sound of moaning reached her ears, a sickening, wet rasping. She froze, listening. The moans were growing louder. More infected were closing in. Without thinking, Mia grabbed Mara's arm. "We need to move, now." The two women darted through the back door of the safe house, emerging into the alley. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the dim light from a half-sunken moon barely illuminated the cracked pavement beneath their feet. The street was empty for now, but they knew better than to assume it would stay that way. "Do you know where they're coming from?" Mara whispered as they moved quickly but quietly. Mia nodded. "They're likely in the north sector of the city. We need to head south to avoid them. The Ashbourne signal is just a few miles that way." Mara was silent, thoughts racing. Ashbourne. The last sliver of hope. But as they made their way through the dark streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something bigger than herself. She could feel the eyes of the world on her, tracking her every step. As they moved further into the ruins of the city, the sounds of the undead grew louder. The shrill screech of a runner echoed through the night, followed by the guttural growl of something larger. Mara's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced around for any sign of movement. Suddenly, Mia stopped. "Over there," she hissed, pointing to a nearby building. "We need to climb." Mara's pulse quickened. She followed Mia's gaze to the crumbling structure ahead, where a broken ladder led up to a fire escape. "Why?" Mara whispered. "Are they close?" Mia nodded grimly. "We can't risk being seen. If we stay low and climb, we'll be above them. We'll avoid detection until we're out of the city." Mara didn't question her. She had no choice but to trust Mia. They rushed to the building and began climbing, the rickety ladder creaking under their weight. The sound of their footsteps was loud in the otherwise silent night. Halfway up, the first of the infected appeared, a slow-moving, shuffling zombie, its mouth agape, drooling. The creature seemed to sniff the air, then raised its head, its eyes flicking toward the ladder. Mara's breath caught in her throat. It was only a matter of time before more followed. "Go, go!" Mia urged, her voice tense. They reached the top of the fire escape just as the first infected began to stumble toward them. From their elevated position, they could see the full scope of the nightmare below, the streets teeming with the undead, some aimlessly wandering, others hunting. Mia crouched low, pulling Mara down beside her. The two women lay flat against the roof, hearts hammering. The only sound now was the wind, the occasional distant groan, and their breathing. Mara's gaze drifted to the dark skyline, the faint glow of the Ashbourne signal still visible in the distance. It was close. They were close. But the price for survival would come at a cost. Mia looked at her, eyes full of unspoken words. "Are you ready?" The night air was thick with tension as Mara and Mia crouched on the rooftop, watching the city below. The infected shuffled aimlessly through the streets, unaware of the two women lying in the shadows. But Mara couldn't shake the feeling that danger was closing in. The stillness around them was temporary, nothing ever stayed quiet for long. Mia's eyes flicked toward the distant glow of the Ashbourne signal. "We're close," she whispered, her voice strained. "We just have to make it through the next few blocks. But it won't be easy. We'll have to move fast." Mara nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. As much as she wanted to believe they were almost there, the city had a way of turning hope into a bitter, hollow promise. Every step felt like a gamble. And trust? Trust was a luxury that didn't exist in this world. "We can't be seen," Mia continued, her voice low. "The Ashbourne group, they've set up traps. If the wrong people get too close, they won't hesitate to fight back." Mara's stomach churned. It wasn't just the undead they had to fear. In this world, human cruelty ran deeper than the bite of any zombie. She'd learned that the hard way. The glow of the Ashbourne signal was now a beacon in the distance, a light that promised safety, but also danger. The city stood between them and salvation, and every corner could bring another ambush or a horde of infected. Mia glanced over at Mara, her face hardening. "We need to keep moving. There's no turning back now." Without waiting for a reply, she gestured for Mara to follow. They descended the fire escape as silently as they could, their movements swift but cautious. The alleyways were empty, but the distant moans of zombies echoed in the silence, reminding them that time was slipping away. They had to get to Ashbourne. Now. As they turned onto a narrow street, Mara's eyes caught a flicker of movement ahead. A shadow, too fast, too deliberate. Someone was watching them. Mia's hand shot out, pulling Mara back into the shadows just as a group of survivors appeared. They were armed, their eyes cold and calculating. Their leader, a tall, scarred man, stopped in front of them, his gaze narrowing. "Where do you think you're going?" he growled, his voice rough. "This is our territory." Mia's hand moved to the knife at her belt, but she didn't draw it yet. "We're just passing through," she said, her tone calm but warning. "We don't want trouble." The man chuckled darkly. "Too bad, because trouble's what you found." Before Mara could react, the man's hand shot out, grabbing Mia by the collar. The other survivors moved in, their eyes glinting with malice. It was clear they weren't just after supplies, they were looking for a fight. Mara's heart raced. She couldn't let them take Mia, not now. They were so close to Ashbourne. She glanced around frantically, looking for anything that could turn the tide. Her hand closed around a broken pipe lying in the dirt. "Mia!" Mara shouted. "Move!" Mia reacted instantly, using the man's grip on her collar to twist out of his reach. She shoved him hard, knocking him back into the others. Mara didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, swinging the pipe at the nearest survivor's head. The blow landed with a sickening crunch, and the man crumpled to the ground. But there were too many of them. One of the survivors raised a crowbar, aiming for Mara's head. She barely had time to duck, feeling the rush of air as the weapon swung past her. Adrenaline surged through her veins. She swung the pipe again, hitting the attacker in the knee and sending him crashing to the ground. But there was no time to celebrate. The leader recovered, pulling a knife from his belt. "You'll regret this," he hissed, charging at Mia. Mara saw him coming, and without thinking, she shoved the leader aside, knocking him off balance. Mia grabbed the opportunity, delivering a punch to his gut that sent him staggering backward. "Run!" Mia yelled. "Now!" Mara didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed Mia's arm, and they ran. The survivors shouted behind them, but the two women didn't stop to look. They sprinted through the dark streets, dodging broken glass and debris. They could hear the shuffling of infected in the distance, but they didn't slow down. The Ashbourne signal was just ahead. As they rounded the final corner, the glow of the signal was brighter than ever. But so was the sound of footsteps behind them. The survivors were still on their tail. Mia grabbed Mara's wrist and pulled her toward a dilapidated building. "This way," she urged, leading her into the shadowed doorway. They crouched low, hiding from the survivors who had stopped just short of their hiding spot. Breathing heavily, Mara looked at Mia, her face pale. "How do we get out of this?" Mia's eyes glinted with determination. "We don't. We fight." And then, as if on cue, the doors to the Ashbourne safe house opened. A figure stepped out, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a rifle slung over his shoulder. "Get in," the man barked. "Hurry!" Without looking back, the two women dashed toward the man, who quickly ushered them inside, slamming the door shut just as the survivors reached the entrance. Inside, the world felt different, safer. For the first time in weeks, Mara allowed herself to breathe. They had made it. But the war wasn't over. Ashbourne was safe, for now. But the price of survival in this new world had just begun to show its true face. The end. For now.